We're going to call this budget meeting to order. This is Tuesday, February 2nd, and it is 3:30. I'm going to, City Manager, do you have a game plan on how you want to do this?
No, not really. The departments have presented their portions of the budget, gone over the key things that they're looking at accomplishing over the course of this next year, and the context of also the projects that they're looking at in their 5-year CIP plan. This is set up the way that not necessarily quite everything that departments had originally requested, but it was what we could work within finances to make a budget work that allowed us to eliminate deficits, get to the 15% cash balance target over the next through 2021. Not violate our usage of debt beyond that 70% of debt capacity, and maintaining existing property taxes. It's a sound budget as is. Now it's just a question of, do you have questions about things, so you want to see things in different priorities from what's been presented to you.
Okay.
And that's more of a interplay between this group here as to if you want more information on a given topic, or you want to think through some what-ifs about what you may as a group be willing to look at doing.
Okay. Before we really delve into this, are there any department heads here that need to clarify anything before we get started? I'm sure as we go through this, we'll have some back and forth dialogue. So let's just jump right in and let's take it as it pops. So if anybody,
Want me to start?
yes, sir.
Well, I think looking at the beginning of this process, one goal was to put together a budget that would result in no tax increase, and I think that was a critical issue and one that has been met based on the proposal before us. I also think that the department heads and the city manager put together detailed programs in this budget that I find no fault with. I mean, I think the fact that we're still not able to do everything we'd like to do because of our financial situation. There probably are things that people would like to see done that we're not going to do in this budget. However, I think continuing to reduce the debt, keep taxes where they are, that's a major goal, and we're accomplishing that. So as far as I'm concerned, I have no further comment. I mean, I'm happy with what I've seen presented, and I'm ready to vote on that basis. End of speech.
Man, that was short and sweet, just like you, Bob.
Good speech.
Let's just, since we started with Bob, Mayor Pro Tem, do you have,
That has been my goal since we hired this gentleman to come here, is to get back into reasonable balance. And I like that we're still headed that direction. I don't want to see us move away from that. Looks like we're clearing up another $430-some thousand. Does that sound right, Jim, in the next year coming up?
Probably pretty close.
And that's a good thing. Another thing that I looked at was the goals that we set back in April of last year. And we've checked off a pretty good chunk of those as we've come through this year already with the new police station and we increased the police department funding. We're working on the dilapidated buildings. We've got the Manor project under control, it looks like. We've done a downtown parking study, or it's in the progress. One thing that we do have listed as an ongoing is a review of current and alternative ordinances, codes, policies, programs regarding code enforcement, property maintenance, housing, nuisance, garbage, trash, right-of-way, which I think still should be one of our concerns. So overall, it looks to me like we're making good progress, and I have no suggestions on something I'd like to change, although I'm open to listening to what anybody else might have to say. And I can reserve any other thoughts for that.
okay, we'll just go right down the road. Starting off, I've got some, but I'll wait and see kind of where this goes. First, I do want to say that I am satisfied with the fact that I thought every department head turned in responsible budgets, and I didn't think anybody was out of line. So I do appreciate that. One area that I still do, I won't say that I have an issue with it, but that I do have a concern with is the police station. My only thought was, since we came up with a budget, I looked at it from the viewpoint of what ifs. And the only what if that I saw was possibly spending more money, and I think a sign of that was spending more money on the building and what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody help me out.
Are you talking about the existing building or the new building?
The new building.
Okay.
Redoing the new building. Anyways, the way the budget sets right now with, was it 3 police cars and then 2, or was it? I thought we'd leave it, yeah. Chief, here was my thought.
Here's my thought.
I didn't, we're saying, I'm out of here.
We hear you.
I didn't even say anything yet.
That microphone's on loan, actually.
Yeah, don't break it.
It just barely sits in there.
That one you really don't have to adjust.
Just,
We can put a sign on there, if you break it, you buy it. But my only concern, Chief, was, and you can talk to me on this, is the fact that we looked at, just a couple of years ago, we looked at the Mount Pleasant Street Bridge. And in the time that has elapsed, and we've gone back to getting a budget on that, it come out to be $2 million more, around there, give or take. My thought is on the building, now that we've got that building, I want to make sure that we do this and not go over budget, but at the same time, I'm expecting to, I really am. And to have it done right, I just think too many things are going to come up. And my only thought was to keep the budget the same, but instead of getting the vehicles, I had a thought of maybe cutting it back 1 vehicle, which would be 3 2-and-2, or for some reason I don't have this written down in my notes. But it was a cost savings of about $40,000 per year, and I thought maybe that money might be a little cushion for us if we run into problems on the building.
Yeah, I mean, actually in the Capitol this year, I was asking for 2 squad cars at a base price of $27,600 and then 1 CID car, and we haven't replaced a CID car for about 4 years. And during my discussions, what I tried to do with the budget woes that we had, we used to always be on we'd get 3 squad cars a year, which put us on a 5-year rotation. And so I thought, well, can we reduce that sum and work with the budget as best we can? And so I went with 3 1 year to the next, 3 2, 3 2, which put us on a 6-year rotation. And so far, so good. The newer vehicles, we got a couple of them now with 100,000 miles, but we had a couple catalytic converter minor issues. We really haven't had the issues with those that we would have with the Crown Vics around 75, 80,000. We were replacing transmissions. The interior dashes were going out on them. So with that said, if we went to, let's say, 2 2-and-2 every year, I mean, that puts us out on a 7+ year rotation. And I think over the course of time, that's going to catch up to you. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to then go buy 4 or go buy 5 even. I mean, so that's why we were just kind of trying to spread that out. I know what you're saying about the building, and I got some of those same concerns. Obviously, we're still a couple of years out, you know. So with that in mind, I know exactly what you're saying, but I think we have tried to reduce that to bare bones. I mean, when you look at our capital for a 43-man department, our capital is about, on the average, well, this year I'm asking it was around 117. Some years it's 126. So on the average, it's around 120,000 a year. So, I mean, that's I guess what I'm trying to say is that's as low as I've been able to get it. I mean, tasers, for example, are $1,200 a piece. We have to put those on a rotation. And so I'm running those out. The tasers we have now are almost 12 years old, which it's no way to be. I mean, so I've increased that to, they're on about a 6-year rotation now, 7 at the absolute longest. So, I mean, I get what you're saying and I fully understand it. But at the same time, we have sincerely tried to keep this at a bare bones minimum, but to keep a fleet that is very dependable. I mean, very dependable. And with that said, there's a little caveat I'll add to that. A lady that I know you know very, very well sees us in the field all the time. And these tours brought this to light. She said, Chief, she said, you know, those cars always look so nice and the guys are pressed and polished and they look so good. And then I came down here and she said, this wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting what I see like on TV, the CSI kind of thing. So, but with that said, the demographic or the impression that we give to the community that we are on top of our game. And I think that's huge. I think that's not only important to the general citizen, but it's extremely important to the criminal. I mean, if you read a demographic study that the FBI did on officers that were felonies killed in the line of duty, they went back, the DOJ went back and interviewed all of those criminals that committed those crimes. And the first thing they said was, well, we're going to size them up. I mean, what's their car look like? What's their equipment look like? What do they look like? Are they in shape? I'm not trying him. He looks like an ex-Marine. But oh no, he looks like he's been here 25 years and he's just here to draw a paycheck, and that's the guy that gets shot. So with that said, those demographics are important as well. So I keep that in mind as we move through the process for the safety of the officers too. So yeah, I get what you're saying. I see where you're coming from.
But you feel strongly that, that you definitely don't want to push that any further, that you feel like, that's,
Yeah, Mayor, I do. I feel like we've cut that just as deep as we can cut it. And I really, really mean that to the bottom of my heart. And it's their office. I mean, they're in that 10, 12 hours a day, every day. And the longer you keep them, the more the seats start to sag and the seats get broken down. And, you know, I like to keep them in the best possible equipment we can afford.
And that speaks to the morale of your officers too, then.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And with all that said, I sincerely thank the community and this council, because I do think we have some of the best when it comes to equipment. And I'll absolutely say that any day of the week, and I'll sincerely thank you for that, and so would they, for sure.
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Councilman Scott? I think
I appreciate Jim Davidson bringing up the nuisance abatements and the review of current and alternative ordinances. That I did ask specifically of the chief and the development director if they could give me an idea of what it would cost to get a better handle or more control on the use of our right-of-ways. And I guess I'm more committed to that than ever after 2 nights ago. I was driving down Maple Street and happened to be in front of Salter School, and there was a young lady probably in her mid-20s that was in an SUV and had 3 kids in the car. And I'm driving westbound, she's driving eastbound, and she decided she wanted my side of the street. And she pulled over, and she went clear over to the curb, but there was another car coming from behind her. I had no choice but to stop. She pulled over and she parked on the side of the street because apparently it was the closest for her to get into the front door of the house that she was going to. And I see this type of thing all the time. And we're ignoring it. And I'm not dissing the police for it. I'm saying it hasn't been a priority. And I think it needs to be. I brought it up at our goal setting, and I've brought it up when we've had our discussions. I think it's serious, and people don't understand, as evidenced by the letter that we received from Angie Smith about the use of city right-of-ways. And I think a lot of people don't know that if we make an exception, and I think it's State Code 84, if we make an exception to allow people to use the right-of-way, then we can't deny anybody the use of the right-of-way, the way that I read the code. And I think we need to get on top of it, because it's the the grass, the streetscape looks worse all the time because of the way that it's being used. People are pulling clear up on there. There's been a car at South and Summer Street for 4 months that's parked between a light post and a sign with no license plates. That's parked right next to that service station, has not moved for 4 months. And you can't see around it sometimes. And you can find this in almost every corner. So I would like to know if what what the chief and what Eric thinks it might cost, or the city manager, or whoever wants to answer it, what it might cost to put people on board. And then also a suggestion that I mentioned this during goal setting too, that we cross-train our employees. We've got utility locators that are on city payroll. We've got nuisance officers, but we also have inspectors, and we have a lot of police officers and firefighters and streets people that are out on our streets all the time. And I know they've got jobs to do, but there are some times that they can take care of an issue very, very quickly with little time and make a huge difference. I guess I'll ask the question, were you able to give it any thought?
Yeah, let me try to address that. I sure wouldn't have a number figure for you. I mean, other than our current parking enforcement's about $44,000. And I think 29.5 of that is wages and vehicles and maintenance and those things. But kind of like I said during our budget presentation, I mean, I think this is coming from a multitude of different points of discussion. And for us, working with 37 policemen, it's probably something that was the absolute lowest priority. And I do think that over time, you're exactly right. I think that people start to take advantage of that. And with that said, we're getting up to steam, and hopefully by July, we'll be in a better position that we could prioritize a person towards helping the problem. But I don't think that that's the sole solution that law enforcement is going to solve this. I think it goes deeper than that. I think that we got a community that has 4 or 5 vehicles per family, and a lot of those houses didn't even used to have a vehicle in the day. I think we have an old aging community, and our streets are in a position that if you got 3 vehicles or 2 vehicles or 4 vehicles, I mean, they add up on the streets. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I mean, do we go to a permit type system that you can only have so many vehicles on the street? I mean, I think it's when Eric and the crew put together the downtown survey, and I don't know the parking survey exactly where that's at or where it's going to end up, but from a comprehensive perspective, maybe we need to look at that from a community-wide perspective, and how do we start to address some of the parking right-of-way issues. Because something that I see all the time is people pulling up and they get 2 of their tires over the curb in between the sidewalk, but at the same time, that's keeping them from getting their windows knocked out and their mirrors knocked off, but it's not the way it was designed to be. And so I think there's a multitude of things that maybe need to happen here, but from pulling across the street, parking on the wrong side of the street, those are things that I can definitely bring up, that I can really start to help address as we get more and more policemen to do that. I mean, I was running through some of the statistics just the other day, and our abandoned vehicle tows, and I'll bring this forward in the annual report, but they're probably up 300 or 400% from the first time you came to me about this. So we're trying. I'm just telling you, when we have 3,000 people in this community that aren't used to being in this community from Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, they don't park down there, I don't think, like we do, or that's my best guess. You know, and I'm not saying that's the sole problem, Tim, but I'm saying that is a contributing factor, and I think that there's a lot of those that are going on, and it probably has been one of our lowest priorities. But with that said, I have shifted parking's enforcement to downtown to trying the best she can in 29 and a half hours to address this. So with that said, your complaints are taken very, very seriously. And I understand what you're asking me, but I feel that it's my fiscal responsibility to bring a budget forward that if it's going to be any type of increases, that comes from you collectively. That doesn't come from me. And so with that said, if this council collectively wants to add personnel or wants to do whatever needs to be done, then so be it. But I think we can help. I think we can change our priorities. And I do think that that was the lowest level. It probably still is today. But not to say that as we get more and more people, I mean, we used to do that. If you came in and there were 6 guys, you're going to do follow-up today. And you 4 are going to answer calls, and you're going to work traffic for us. And that's something we haven't been able to do for almost 4 years now. Where we got 4 guys, you're answering calls for service, and we hope we get those done. So, I mean, with that said, I think we can have a little bit of a change in philosophy. No problems there, but I want you to be mindful that we need to balance that as well. We really do, because some of these neighborhoods that really need a lot of help with maybe parking and nuisances, there are also neighborhoods that we need to build trust in, and that we need to build rapport in, and that we need to make sure that, yeah, we got a parking violation, but is there another way maybe we can correct that? And I just ask that you be mindful of that too, because we have fought this battle hard now, I know for sure, for 3.5 years. And the last thing I want to do is lose some of that rapport as well. So, I mean, that's kind of, by all means, 1, we have, and 2, we can be more mindful. But as far as us structurally changing the organization of the police department with personnel, I mean, that's something that you guys would have to direct me if,
Well,
I mean, that's the best I can answer it, I guess.
All right. And I bring it up because the public has been extremely supportive of public safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've seen an additional police officers and firefighters. They supported the passage of a bond, and I want to show them, and I know you do, and I'm not dissing the department or you in any way. I just want to show them a little extra on the part of the city that, you know, I'm hearing the complaints, especially since I'm bringing it up. People are not hesitant at all to stop me and say, yeah, Tim, that really is an issue.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
I don't care what the editorial in the newspaper said. That really is an issue.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And, you know, and it's not, I know there's narrow streets, and I know sometimes people are gonna have to park up on the curb. And that's not a huge complaint. But when you're on Central Street, where the street right-of-way is nearly 70 foot wide, the concrete street, and they're still parking up
Yeah,
there?
yeah, no.
Or the guy's parking right at his front door, or they're parking across the sidewalk where people in wheelchairs, the handicapped people can't get through?
Nope.
That's too much.
Yeah,
That's not, that's just not acceptable. And for me, and I'll continue to bring it up until we can find an answer. And I'm trying to educate the council on my position, and that, and as I move through here, it might make a little more sense on where I'm going with it. But
Yeah, no. No, good enough.
I'll come up with some numbers somehow.
Well, it really depends on what you're wanting to talk about. Vicky's position and what she does costs for her position in the vehicle and the supplies and everything to do that costs $35,000 a year for just under 30 hours a week devoted to that. Additional officer, as chief would look at, depending on what they're doing for health insurance, is 70 to 80,000 just for the officer, let alone the equipment that goes with that.
Well, again, it's not a police department issue. It's a citywide issue. People parking illegally is part of the issue, but the use of the right-of-way is a police department and a development department.
The development department talked, Eric, what did you look at for what you were thinking of with that?
For ours, I guess the focus on the nuisance side of it, we've had discussion over the years, would look at like a seasonal part-time position that May to October or something, a 6-month position, whether that be 24, 32, whatever number of hours. Right now, again, kind of what the chief had said, the number of rentals has increased over the last few years, so if their time has been devoted to that more so, but if something were devoted to more on a proactive nuisance basis, looking at that seasonal, part-time type position, whether 6 month, 32 hours, I don't know if just on a wage standpoint, looking at what other positions are, it'd probably be around $10,000 to fund that, looking at a $12 to $12.50 wage. I don't know the availability or likelihood of getting someone in at that to do that type of job. Nuisance was part-time in the past. We cycled through a lot of people, and that was, I think, a higher, around that rate or a little higher at the time, 5 or 6 years ago, so. But that would be something, I guess, on our end, if wanted more focus just on the nuisance end, looking at a seasonal part-time position.
Thank you. Change direction a little bit. There's plenty of things that we do as a community that a lot of communities do that are necessary, but and sometimes not. We run a golf course. I wonder if it's time that we looked at a different way of operating and let the private sector take over. Look at possibly selling the golf course or leasing the course to a private company. Profit and greed are drivers for business people, and not so much for a public entity. Theirs is to do the best they can with what they've got. And I'm not proposing that we do that within this budget, but that we look at that all year long as a potential for next year's budget. And in the same light, I think we should look at the Recplex in the same way. We've done that with Memorial Auditorium, and we're starting to see a little bit of progress there. You know, if that continues or not, we still need to look at I think at the others.
It has merit. Sorry, that has merit.
Right. Jim, last year, you had proposed that we, reduce the library budget by a sizable sum. And I had stepped up as one of the 3 council members that voted against that because I wanted to see another year of how they operated with after having such a large reduction in their budget the preceding year. In my eyes, I've seen growth in programs and planned growth again this year is what it looks like based on the presentations that we've had. And in business, spending money to increase sales or to increase customer activity is a good thing if there's a return on that investment. And providing library services, I think, is a very important part of the city function, but I think there has to be a limit. And I think there's an opportunity to show the public that we can be a bit more conservative and still provide more than basic library services, and take another look at that budget and that proposal that you had a year ago.
I think the last time that I proposed a budget decrease was
13.
2 years ago. Last year we didn't, but yes, 2 years ago, we looked at potentially that as one of the options when we were dealing with a shortfall right about the time of Emerald Ash Borer and all the other things. But, yeah.
It was 2 years ago?
Yeah, last year we didn't propose any changes. We were able to maintain services.
Well, has, has your position changed because of the financial position of the city, or is it?
Actually, when we were doing, the last time that I proposed as an option, a reduction in library services, was when we did have a deficit, when we were short funds because of a list of different things. Emerald Ash Borer we were starting to deal with. We didn't have the funding on the franchise fee. Our local option sales tax revenues were significantly lower than what had been budgeted by about $500,000 a year. And there are a couple of other things, and there is a list of things that we put forward to make cuts. We made some of those cuts. There were some discussions then, 2 years ago, that was at budget time. That was 3 months after we did those host of cuts. And there were some options put out there too, to get down to where we had a balanced budget. Last year, we didn't have to have anything to make a balanced budget because we were able to move forward with what we'd done the previous year. Now, as you have a discussion about, if you're wondering about where our library services fit, you can look at comparisons. You saw some comparisons in terms of just gross dollar amounts for communities our size, and we're still the top of that spectrum. But that being said, you have to make a determination of what are the community's priorities. And if you think that the priorities need to be reallocated, that really is a council decision. If you think that resources should be moved from the library towards right-of-way enforcement or whatever the cause, that's something that needs to be thought through here.
I would like to, I'm glad the library was brought up. I ran into somebody the other day. Here, first off, I want to say this. When looking at the budget, I think everybody probably goes into it looking at it a little bit differently. I always ask myself, first off, because I think if you just look at figures, you're doing the city and yourself an injustice, because not everything comes down to numbers. It comes down to, again, like, what does this service do for the city? What does it mean for the people that live there? And then I always like to make sure that I take it a step further and think, well, if I needed that service, or I was in a position that I didn't have internet access, I would really have to rely on the library quite a bit. Actually, Rhonda, while you're here, can I have you come up here for a second, if you don't mind? I would just like to clarify too, where we already have made, you've got your figures in front of you, don't you?
You bet.
Can you tell us where the budget was in 2000 and, when did I get on the council? 2011, 12?
I don't know if I have all of it going back that far.
Oh, sure you do. I'm just playing
I don't know if I
with
have it with me. I can, and I didn't spend a lot of time on it when I gave my presentation, but I did include a little bit of our budget history. It was fiscal year 13, I believe, that we made some changes in our personnel for some savings, and then it was fiscal year 14 where we saw, there we go, is that better? And it was fiscal year 14, I believe, we're going into that, we had an $80,000 cut and then a $20,000 cut. And then it was at that time that it was voted on at that time to cut $140,000 from that year and the next year. So fiscal year 2015, the year before, they voted to do a $140,000 cut, so it was in both years. So fiscal year 16, our current year, I believe is our first year that we have not had any cuts in the budget.
That's correct, since I've been on. I think you could look at it two ways. You know, with us being at the top, I think there's still areas where we could probably take things from you. I have to be honest with you. I've spent more time at the library just coming in and out and talking with people at the library, because I really wanted a better view, kind of, I guess, of what the library really means and how important it is and about these services, and if some of them were really needed. And I'll tell you, this isn't gonna be very popular, but, it's not what I'm here to be popular. I'm here to do what I think is right for the city of Burlington. And, that's why we get elected, is because people believe that we will try to do what is best. And I really can't say that I have issue with the library. I think, first off, everybody's doing a phenomenal job, but I think the library's needed. And I think, the services that you guys have are, they're awesome. You know, maybe we're at the higher of the level because our services are just so fantastic. You've got great people that work down there. I know that there's a lot of people, and, you know, some people can look at the numbers and say, well, Burlington is this big, and these only so many people are using the services. But when you rely on those services week in and week out, it's paramount. It's huge. And I'll tell you, I'm satisfied with leaving the library where it's at. I wanted a budget where, again, we wouldn't have to entertain any increases in taxes. I think we do need to have some exhale periods where we can sit back and think, how is this going to work going into the future? And I would still like another year to see what does happen. So I just want to say, just for me, I wouldn't have any issue if we did not touch the library this year. I just want that to be said. Again, I'm open as well to anything. If the council is really strong about something, then I trust in the council as well, and I definitely can bend. But I just have to say, the time that I have to give you this, because I want to hit on a little bit everybody, but I just have to say, the library is just, it's fantastic. It really is, and unless people go down there and see how much it means to some of the people in the community, you really can't put it into words, especially when you're looking at those figures, because when you look at them, just from the outside looking in, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. It does catch your attention. When I got on the council, the first thing I thought was, man, the library, that's just too much money. We've got to get some of that money. But I just have to say, you want to talk about bang for the buck? The library, I think, is second to none, and it really means so much to a lot of people. I just want to throw that out there. I think our library is amazing. I really do.
I agree with that, by the way. I think what impresses me also is the excellent programs you continue to run and expand, and with fewer people. I mean, you reduced your staff, which I know was painful, shall we say, but you got the job done, and yet I don't think the public perceived a lesser effectiveness as far as your programs. So anyway, that's the end of my talk at this time. However, whatever.
You reserve the right.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with the mayor. Even, I thought I used the library a lot, and then on our tour, it was like, oh, I've never been to this corner of the library. There's just so much there, and there's so much to offer. And you guys get a lot of help. You know, there's people out there, you know, there's the grants and other donors that you have. I just think it's really great what you've done. You know, you did mention that you had, you know, those, to me, would be big cuts, those past 2 years, and I'd like to not do anything, you know, with the library's budget at this time, so.
Rhonda, can you tell me those numbers again and what years you were talking?
Sure. It was around fiscal year 14 that there was an $80,000 cut, a $20,000 cut, and then there was the one time when they voted for a $140,000 cut in the current year, and then a $140,000 cut in fiscal year 15.
And that was when we were doing the Emerald Ash Borer response to that.
That was done in one thing.
Net
yeah.
expenditures for the library in 13 were $1,553,000. In 14 were $1,338,000. In 15 were $1,240,000. So we saw a $310,000 reduction over those two cycles. And
This is the first year that.
this current year, it's gone up 30,000, which is, I think it's 2.5%. And in the proposed budget, it goes up 34,000, which is 2.8%, I think.
I know in my presentation, I mentioned that our fiscal year 17 proposed budget is at the level it was in fiscal year 6. That was our total. I went back and looked then later, because we were talking about the net effect. Our fiscal year 17, when you take out revenue, is $936,000. And it was actually in fiscal year 2000 was the last time that our net was at that amount, or close to that amount, because our revenue has increased in that time.
But I guess I would have to say to Councilman Scott's point, you could have a $100,000 cut to the library and we'd still have one of the best funded libraries in our size of a community. But you gotta, it's whatever you feel is the right mixture of expenditures. I mean, that's kind of hard to, there aren't any right or wrongs of how you spend money. It's what you can agree on about how you want to do it and what you want your community to be. So.
And I guess if I could address that comparison to the 6 communities in comparison to Burlington's, when you look at the level of use of those, the closest one is Muscatine, and it's still over 100,000 items less a year that are circulated. And like Clinton, we circulate 4 times the amount of materials that they do. And that's just looking at circulation, meeting room use, technology use, attendance at programs and things. I didn't add up all of those numbers, but we also do more or have more use than those communities. Do you have any other questions for me?
That's all I had.
Back when we were first started on this, to try to get things in order, I was trying to get the council to do more cuts than what we did. And still, since we were asking for a tax increase, and I wanted to show that we were gonna make more cuts. And honestly, Rondo Library was probably the easiest one to look at, because it's not an essential service, but it is a good service, and I like the library. But I'm not going to push for a cut right now from the library. I've thought about this a lot, Councilman Scott, and you have to choose your battles, and I'm not willing to fight this battle right now, so that's where I stand.
I can appreciate what everybody's had to say. Don't get me wrong, Ron, I'm not anti-library by any means. I'm pro-citizen. I've had a lot of citizens come to me, and they do the comparisons. And, if everybody was funded to the same level, maybe their numbers would be the same. I mean, the more money that you have, the more ability you have to attract customers, or patrons, users, and it's a good thing when you have bottomless pockets and you can come up with the funding that way. Jim said it wasn't an essential service. I think it is, because there are people in this community that can't get that type of service any other way. So it's, it is important to them, but I still think there's a limit on what we can do as a community financially, and that's why I bring it up.
When I mention essential service, I'm talking about what I consider the 3 main things that we're supposed to be doing: police, fire, and public works, streets. So that's what I meant by essential.
Yeah, I know that.
And I wanna say this too. I had a couple people say something, are you gonna get the library? Are you gonna take something from the library? Well, I don't think we should take something from the library just to say that we did. If we can't, again, we can trim and trim and trim all day long, but I don't wanna do that. The only time I wanna take away from something that I feel like is really being an asset and a blessing to Burlington is if we say, if we took this away, we could drop taxes, or, we could lower taxes, or we could do this. We'd have to shut you down to do that, and I'm not prepared to do that. So, I'm looking for areas, I'm looking for, again, I just hit up Chief for a vehicle a year, you know what I'm saying? So I'm still looking at areas, but, at the same time, this is 1 year that we're making a decision about for the year, 2016, and, I really would like to sit back and see, what 2016, brings us, and, I'm satisfied with that. I'm satisfied with that. Does anybody have any other questions for Rhonda?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I didn't want to bring this up, I was going to wait till the end, but I'll just go ahead and get it out now so I can get my 2 cents over and done with. You guys won't have to hear too much more from me. But there is one thing, Chief, you brought up, you said something about perception, how that's important, and I totally believe that. What I also think is important is that perception and reality try to find some place to meet. And I just want to see and I'm not saying that I haven't seen it, I'm just encouraging that we see in 2016 that same continued commitment to diversity. It seemed like we got off to a really good start. We lost a fire or a police officer, but I can't say this enough because I think it really it's a blessing to the community, and I think when you're dealing with a community, when you're working with a community or any group of people, one of the most important things is cooperation, and I think the more diverse you are, the more cooperation that you get in all areas. So I would like to encourage all department heads, again, that we still continue to stay committed to diversity in all areas. I can't let this budget cycle go without saying that, so. Council?
Jim, did you say that the funding was figured in for the compensation?
Yes.
Correct.
That's all I had.
Councilwoman Wilson?
Well, I definitely think that, the right-of-ways that we talked a little bit about, definitely should be, a higher priority, along with, the nuisance. And I don't know what our options are for that. I don't know if a part-time position is or ever will be feasible, that kind of thing. Because if the people who are currently doing it are, overloaded already as it is because of such an increase in rentals, it's not fair to expect somebody else to do more when they're already stretched to the limit. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that.
As he says that, it's not just about the rentals changes
Right.
over time. Eric's department did have 9 individuals in it, and it now has 7. So you've gone down a couple, and his position has been combined with
Right.
another department head, so you're seeing people spread in more ways than they used to. And I guess part of what's happened with that has meant that when it comes to the time available for nuisance work, it's become more of a complaint basis driven thing, just because they don't have time to focus on, really devote to being proactive on things.
Right.
And as he's mentioned, the idea of having someone do this on a part-time basis, I think even to be able to throw something out there is there's a concern, how feasible is it that you can get someone who's willing to come in and do nuisance enforcement on a part-time basis for no benefits and not a.
I don't know, I think you might actually be surprised. I
Well,
find,
they'd be very happy if
Oh.
it would happen. It's just their
Yeah.
concern. We've had it with the forestry department.
my
You
goodness.
can't find people to fill your forestry
Really?
positions.
think so.
This is a type of position that's one of the most negative
Oh, yeah.
interactions that you
Yeah,
can
I
have
can-
with the public, and
Yeah.
their concern is, even if you find the funds to do it on a
Mm-hmm.
part-time basis, will you really be successful? We've had some spots where that's worked out very well, and we've had other spots where it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So they just don't know. So,
Of course, the way I look at some of this too, I keep hearkening back, I guess, to the financial deficit we got ourselves into. And with Jim's guidance and others, we're coming out of that. And I can see, looking to the future, I probably won't be here, but where we'll have the economic base here, if you will, and the efficiency of the city, where we can have more police officers, more inspectors, and so forth. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the community grow, and when it grows, it can support more employees in our public safety and fire and so forth. So when I sit here and say, I'm not gonna vote to add anybody, that doesn't mean forever, but until we get out of this hole, I guess I'm playing it tight, that's all. A pretty good speech, didn't you think?
I thought that was really
You didn't
nice.
say anything.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're top notch, man. There's only one. I want to say, I do have to say this, I want to tell Mr. Trexel who left us. Oh, there he is. He's coming. I just want you to send a message to your department, that, just to remind them that we have not forgotten about the fire department, and, God knows we love our police department, but we love our fire department too. You guys, every time you guys go out, you're saving somebody's life or trying to. And I just think, I don't want that to get overlooked, and I just wanna say this, because it's not costing the city anything for me to say this. That we have not forgotten about the fire department, and we do appreciate the amount of, I know where you'd prefer to have your staff level at, and it has not been there, and by the looks of it, it's not going to be where it needs to be, in your view. But I know they work really hard. I just wanna send that message out to them that, we appreciate them. They're true heroes. They really are. And, I think we've got one of the best fire departments. I'll take the Pepsi Challenge, pretty much anywhere. I do. I just want to say that because, we've been talking a lot about the police department because we've needed a police station so bad, and so that's kind of overtaken everything. And I just don't want the fire department to feel like they're forgotten. They're heroes, and we appreciate them. We appreciate them. It's just, we've been so far back behind the eight ball with the police, building that, we really, really needed to tackle that, and that's been priority one. But we certainly appreciate you and your department.
Well, and the chief's time with the department, I'm pretty sure you've been there long enough to see a major upgrade in the main fire station. You were here when the new fire station was built out at the airport, right?
Yeah.
So that's, public stepped up for them too, so.
Thanks for saying that.
I have
That's all I've
nothing
got.
further.
Are you guys satisfied for right now? I mean, are we good to go?
I want to continue this alternative ordinances idea. Maybe it was 3 years ago, I went to League of Cities meeting, and I think it was Cedar Rapids had a presentation about their nuisance ordinance, and it was really, really good. And did we ever follow up on that, Eric?
I don't recall if
Yeah.
they presented anything to council at the time.
I would like to see that happen. Just make some contact and find out what, knowing that if we look at stuff like that, it's going to have to add personnel because you
Right.
can't do it. So I agree with you, Councilman Fleming. That's something that we need to look at down the road. I don't think, obviously, we can't do it this year, but I really would like to see that pursued. If that's something Mr. Scott can agree with also.
If it comes 5 years from now, it's better than not coming at all.
Amen to that.
That's right.
I'd like to see where everybody
I won't
is.
shut up until we
You know we won't. God bless you. I'd like to see where everybody's at on, us meeting back and finalizing this then. I would like tonight to digest what we had. I was kind of expecting a little bit more tonight. But let's not waste any time with this. I mean, are you guys ready to wrap this up?
I am.
Or do you
I am.
want a night to digest this, or?
I don't.
No,
I don't see any reason
I'm
why.
done.
I mean, if,
I would admit it's one of the best budgets that I've ever had the opportunity to look at. I think the staff's done a tremendous job, and it's,
I'm ready to vote.
I'm a bit conservative. I'm gonna bring up every opportunity I can to try to find ways of lowering our property taxes.
And I agree with you. And that was one of the first things I said to you, if you remember it. When we started talking about budget, I don't want to see a tax increase, and I'd rather see a decrease. But right now, this is where we are, and I do want to commend the department heads. Seems like back when I was on council earlier, we never got this opportunity to hear from you like that.
Right.
And this is so much better, and this is good, and you've done a great job, so thank you. And thank you, City Manager, for orchestrating.
So if
I
we
just
had-
want, I just want to ask this one more time again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, if we have unanimity here, when can we vote then? We don't need to meet Tuesday, I mean,
No, actually, what our plan of action, Stephanie, you have on this next work session, setting a public hearing for consideration of the budget. That would be, you would be setting a public hearing on the 16th, the council meeting on the 16th for the, to be held, the hearing to be held at the March 7 council meeting, where you would approve the final budget. That March 16, setting the date for the public hearing, you're setting your expenditure levels by fund, by program area. And so as you're approving that, you're essentially approving the concept of what this budget is. If you're going to have any formal changes to that, you're wanting to see something that's different than how it's currently laid out, you're going to want to get that done fairly quick. You want to have that voice that fairly soon. We kind of go under the assumption that you're, from this point, that you're okay with how it's structured.
yes.
And you'll naturally have the opportunity for discussion at the work session this next week, because that's one of the action items is setting that date for public hearing. So if you have some discussion continuing to, if there was something that needed to be addressed or
Yeah.
changed, you still have time at that work session to do it.
Very good.
But a formal decision, you kind of formally approve at this point, if your general consensus of where it's at, your formal approval is through the two steps of setting the public hearing based on what we presented, and then the actual approval after the public hearing. That actual approval, technically you can reduce. I think we did that a couple of years ago, where we had a reduction occur after the public hearing. You cannot increase expenditure in any category. Once you've set your amounts that you go for a public hearing, you've set your maximum not to exceed expenditures by budget category. But you certainly can reduce.
Yeah. Okay,
Well, I think we all are pretty much on the same page as, we're all happy that as long as we're not seeing that where there's a possibility of increase, that makes it a whole lot easier to work with. I guess I'll just let it digest up until the next, till the work session, and we'll see if there's anything then, but I think everybody's pretty much satisfied then?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any department head that needed to, that wanted to say anything before we close out?
Don't you dare.
I heard that. Okay. Councilman Bob, what do you think?
What, this is a work session, isn't it?
I know, but I'm still asking you anyway.
I move that we adjourn at this time with the understanding that we can re-adjourn or never.
Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Good night.